Welcome to season 2 of the Play Their Way podcast, where we talk about all things in child first coaching. I'm your host, Laura Jane Jones, and today's guest is Hull University's Professor Adam Nicholls. Professor Nicholls is an expert in the practical application of psychology to children's sport and coaching. Welcome along, Professor Nicholls, or Adam, what would you prefer?
Oh, Adam, absolutely, LJ. No one ever calls me Professor Adam Nicholls either.
Great. Well, even though we're going a bit more informal, I should note that the professor has published over 90 papers and written 4 books on this area of expertise of psychology and its practical application. So I'm going to start with what probably feels like the broadest question imaginable to you and ask, what's the psychological impact of play in children's sport?
Yeah, so the psychological impact, it all depends upon the kind of the nature of the play. But generally, the main impact is fun. And fun is something we want to create because we know when children are having fun, they're much more likely to be engaged and actually continue engaging in play. It's only when, I guess, the coaching can come in and things become more structured that we can lose the essence of this fun that is so important. And it's not just important for children; it's important for all individuals engaging in sport or physical activity. It has to be fun.
We've been defining play in very practical, physical terms on the podcast, but does it mean something different when it's defined psychologically?
No, I think play is play, as psychologists, we don't have a kind of definition of play, but what we are interested in is the impact of play and how we assess the way in which people perceive play to be and how that makes them feel. We're coming more from that approach, I would say.
Do you think there's a negative perception of play in sport?
I do. I think that there's a negative perception of handing out certificates. Oh, sorry, handing out participation certificates. I was speaking at an event on Saturday, and one of the questions came up about should we be awarding participation certificates, and the answer to that is no. Participation certificates do not work because they become undervalued and undermined by children, even children at a young age. But what we should be doing is we should be rewarding children who put in effort and make improvement. And that is completely different to a participation certificate because if a child's in a session who hasn't made any effort or maybe hasn't improved over a number of weeks, then they don't get rewarded by the coach. They don't get the praise from the coach. So yeah, we need to move away from that seeing play as bad and actually play is really good and actually as coaches, we should be rewarding that, and as teachers, about rewarding those who put in the effort and who make improvements. And I can't underestimate how important this is and how much of an impact this can have on children and adolescents when participating in any form of either it's recreational play or more competitive play.
Is play the enemy of competition? When children think about things, if they are engaging in play, does it mean that their competitive instinct is perhaps dulled because they don't take things as seriously?
Um, I don't think play is the enemy of competition. I think they complement each other. I think competition is good, and I think it's good when it's managed properly, by coaches, because having a competition can give you some motivation, it can give you something to train for, but it's about how it's managed by the coaches. I think they complement each other. Like, you look at most children on a lunchtime, they're playing football. It's not organised, it's just something they do in a lunchtime. But yeah, then they will also become more involved in competitive training and sport. So I think they complement each other.
Play Their Way is defined by its 3 pillars: voice, choice, and journey. And whilst play is obviously named in the strapline, we're talking more about self-advocacy and self-determination for young people.
Hmm.
And a child-led approach to coaching. We've talked a lot on this podcast anecdotally about the benefits, but on a more clinical, evidence-based level, what are the major positives we see from young people when it's
Yeah,
a self-advocacy approach?
yeah, there are so many benefits. So I'll just start off with learning. So when we give a child a choice in when they receive their feedback, their learning is improved. So instead of, and I think there's a tendency, and I've observed this, and even probably with my own children when they're doing some playing some sport or doing something, is there's a tendency to want to correct them when they make a mistake. Oh, you're doing that wrong, or if you just do this. But actually, as coaches, we should be quiet and we should say to the child, when do you want the feedback? You tell me when you want some feedback, and I'll give you that feedback. And we know that children are much more likely to want feedback after a successful attempt rather than a failed attempt, which is probably something as coaches, it's probably not something you would think or expect. And that again, that enhances learning too. So again, when we're giving children more of a choice, we can maximize their learning. It also has a massive impact on their motivation and their engagement levels, their enjoyment levels. So when maybe old school coaches who think that this approach is wrong and it's too liberal, actually there are many benefits of that. And I know some of the counter arguments to this are, how are we going to control the kids? How are we, the children won't listen? What will happen? It'll be madness, it'll be chaotic. But do you know what? If the children are enjoying that and that's something they enjoy, they're engaged in this in their own personal time. Why can't it be like that? Why does it have to be children listening to the coaches all the time, standing in a line waiting for a demonstrate or waiting for their turn in a drill? Who says that's good? Probably the children don't think it's good because they're spending too much time standing still and talking. And I would suggest the reason why they're maybe not engaged is because they could be bored at some points of the training session, and that's not what we want.
Do we underestimate children? One of the things that you've talked about there in terms of giving children that self advocacy space and giving them the opportunity to decide what they want, are we perhaps underestimating that they will self organize? That whilst we assume that there's going to be chaos if we give them the keys to the kingdom, actually, because of the tools that we're setting out, they will start to self organize in that space.
Yeah, I think we vastly underestimate children and adolescents in terms of probably their understanding of play and what their team may need. I think from a kind of a more of a pragmatic approach, I think in some situations children will have knowledge and probably could and should be guiding sessions. Whereas there may be other situations where, the coach's experience is required and they can have more of an input. So I think it's about finding the balance, really. That's how I would see it. And having spent time working with different coaches, I think yeah, I think that's something they're probably more on board with.
I'm talking to you as a professor and in the practical application of all of this as a psychologist, but you are a dad, you're a father who's watched your own children being coached.
Hmm.
How much has that informed your work when you've seen not just good coaches who are tooled up in the right way and have allowed children self-expression, but also bad coaches?
Yeah, this has had a massive impact on me, like personally, professionally, and from a research perspective. Yeah, I've seen some absolutely horrendous behaviour from coaches. I remember my son's first match. So he came to football late. Well, not late, but he had no interest at all in football, even playing at school until he was 8 years old. Then he started playing on a lunchtime. Then he said he wanted to join a club, and then he had his first match as an 8-year-old. We drove home, and the first thing he said was, "Why was their PE teacher shouting at them?" So obviously he didn't know it was a coach. What do you say to that? You know, I I can't. I just Well, yeah. And I just said there's no reason why he should be shouting at them. He's probably frustrated, but it's no excuse to behave that way. Uh, but just seeing one thing I do see quite a lot is the impact of some negative coach behavior on children, and you can see them just shrinking into their shells, almost becoming just scared to touch the ball again, or and scared to make a mistake. I've seen children crying and wanting to come off the pitch, and their parents make them stay on. I, it just, I sometimes find it quite hard to watch, some of the coach behaviour. You know, if you observe the coaches, it's like they're coaching in the Premiership. They've got their clipboards, they've got their iPads, and they're dishing out all these instructions. And part of me thinks, oh well, I know for a fact when I speak to my son, and you hear the instructions he receives, and I'll speak to him afterwards. Like, do you know what that means, or what do you think the coach is meaning when he's saying this? And he doesn't have a clue.
Mm.
And so it's, again, another key learning is when you're offering instructions to children, do they understand what you're asking of them? And if they don't, well, then it's just it's a waste of time. Like the classic one in football is make sure you stand in goal side. Well, what does goal side mean? What does do they understand that? And it's not, I do see some, amazing examples of youth coaches, and in particular one of my son's team who is just amazing, and he really isn't about results. He's about developing and learning, giving the children life lessons, or learning about discipline, learning about teamwork, learning about communication. And for him, the results don't matter, and that's exactly how that's kind of my philosophy. I never even asked my son if I've not been to the match, whether the team won or lost. I don't care about that. I care about whether he enjoyed it, whether he had a good time playing with his mates, and what did he learn. The results just don't matter.
But then to pick up on that, is that perhaps where we need a recalibration of sports psychology around what results represent in children and youth coaching? Not necessarily the result on a scoreboard, but as a coach, your results should be perhaps something of quality that you're getting from your session, from your match, as opposed to a 5-1 win over the team you're playing.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. And I often think about this: what is success? And you hear about, you stood on the side. Again, I keep referring back to my experiences, but you stood on the sidelines, and the parents are like, well, if we started with our best team for the first 10 minutes, we'd be beating these 4-0, and then we could bring everyone else on. But is that success? Well, so what is success? To me, first and foremost, success is one, children enjoying what they're doing, and also in 4 years' time, children the number of the more children playing as possible. So for example, we know that in football, there's a yearly dropout of up to 30% of children dropping out of football. So for me, the most important indicator of success would be in my son's club is that number is down as low as possible. That's success. More children playing at 14, and bucking the trend of this 30% dropout rate. Because one of the biggest reasons children drop out is because it's not fun anymore. They're not enjoying it. They have bad experiences. So if we can reduce those negative consequences, then hopefully we'll reduce dropout.
There's a weird dichotomy because we've talked about the fact that there's no place really for participation awards because kids see through that. But as adults, our end goal in sport and children's sports participation is just that participation. So perhaps it's coaches who need those participation awards. And I guess that brings me on to a question that, we're talking about the psychology of children, but actually, is it the psychology of coaches that needs to be addressed the most when we are looking at a child-led approach to coaching? It's not the children who we need to look at the
Yeah.
psychology, it's the coaches.
Oh, 100%. I completely agree with this. It's about making or educating the coaches about their behaviour. So we know that there's a study published recently by that 40% of coaches are unaware of their behaviour, kind of unaware of their negative behaviour. So, i.e., their body language, the way in which they speak to children, uh, the way in which they offer feedback, and this can have a negative impact if nearly half of coaches are unaware of what they're doing. So first and foremost, I think it does start with the coaches, and it starts with enhancing their behaviour, also their awareness of their behaviour. And this isn't easy, but I do think that coach education is vital of importance to start this process of and enhancing the knowledge of coaches. I think coaching is so much more than setting up drills. It's to me that's the kind of the element that is least important. The most important is about developing relationships with children, communicating with children, uh, building confidence in children. Those are far more important. And if you look at even, you look at professional sport, Steve Kerr at the Golden State Warriors. This is an NBA coach who's won 4 titles as a coach, and he's all about sport has to be fun. What are his values? His values are fun. So sport has to be fun. Training has to be fun. And these are, an NBA team. Um, and I think that message does get lost somewhere in grassroots sport. You have an NBA coach who is we're making training about fun and people enjoying themselves. And sometimes I see very little of that in the grassroots sports that I observe.
It's a bit of an irony, isn't there, that people who are
Mm,
coaching elite sportsmen and women are looking for the fun in it, whereas those at grassroots level are looking at elite sport and thinking that's what we need to apply to young people.
mm,
Something I was going to ask you, you're talking about kind of the psychology of coaches and the re-education. Can you teach an old dog new tricks? And when I say an old dog, I don't mean older coaches, because one of the greatest
yeah,
advocates for this approach is Pete Sturgis, who I know won't mind me saying is one of the oldest guests we've had on the podcast. But I know that there are young coaches who still have this old school approach, and that's what we should probably term it, the old school approach of shouting and
yeah.
berating, whereas actually listening is our first stepping stone through play their way.
I think, I suppose this is an attitude, and we know that attitudes can be changed and changed through education. So yes, we can teach kind of this old school mentality. We can. Can you ever get rid of it? Maybe not, but I think the key is about educating coaches regarding the benefits of listening, of understanding, of showing caring, and also the negative effects of pressurizing languages, activities excluding people, uh, not allowing children to problem solve. Why are those things bad? And I think hopefully if we can educate coaches about the differences between the approaches and why one is kind of more beneficial to children and long-term health and psychological well-being, you would like to think that we would be able to change their behaviours. It might take time, and some would probably be resistant, but hopefully they would see the benefits of this approach. You would like to think anyway.
Do you think if coaches who perhaps are more stick than carrot took a step back and reflected on how they were coached as young people, they'd find it easier to understand this change in mentality and how perhaps we can breed more success through child advocacy?
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm thinking about some of the coaches who I was coached by and who I know and who are definitely much more stick than carrot. And there's very, very little carrot and much more stick. Do you know what? When I've had issues with some coaches in the past, particularly my children, one of my child's team, it was there's one guy in particular who I'm sure they won't be listening to this, who and I tried to point out why the stick approach and some of the issues about punishing players and shouting at players isn't helpful. His answer was, "We just all have different ways of coaching," and that was it. So what I've just said previously that the coaches should be aware and have an understanding of this new approach should help them. Actually, do you know what? Maybe it might not with all people. Uh, and do you know what? As well, I think this approach of more of a child-led approach, it takes more time. You might think, "Oh, I don't have to organise this session but actually, it takes more time. It takes more trust." And it actually probably requires higher level of coaching to be able to do that because you've got to be confident in your own ability. Um, yeah, I don't know if I've answered that question that well actually, but yeah,
No, I think you have. I think it actually leads me on quite neatly around that carrot versus stick. And I think that, that obviously lives with you. I'm in my mid 20s, add 10. And I still think about coaches that I had as a child and those coaches who were more stick than carrot and the impact that had on me then and the impact it has on me now when I look back at it. So I guess as a sports psychologist, we talk now more and more about mental health in young people. If we are taking a child first approach in sport, how beneficial is that to children's mental health?
Oh, so beneficial. And when I think about observing, again, a lot of this comes from my I know the literature, and then it kind of seeing the literature in action with children, and particularly some of my son's friends who I know, and you see them, breaking down on the pitch. It is breaking down. It's crying on the pitch because they're sad and unhappy, and I can't in any way see how that is positive for their mental health. I can't see how they're going to go away from that match thinking, yeah, I enjoyed today, when they've come off crying. Or and you see it quite a lot. And then, but you look at the other side, it is teaching them life lessons. You can't always win all the time, and there is that's very, very important. But I think the way in which coaches manage situations when children are upset is not good. And I think about when I go back as well, thinking about how, as a child, 8-year-old child, 9-year-old child, whatever, you spent all day in school, probably being told what to do, being told to sit down all the time. And then do you need that approach when you're going for what should be fun? Training at 6 o'clock at night, and what impact does that have? What impact does it have if, as a child, if you've had a bad day, you've maybe been told off at school, and then you go into football and you're getting shouted at again when school should be fun, but also the football should be fun. And I really think that coaches need to be aware of that. And yeah, I just I know I keep coming back to this, but training and sport, organized sport, it has to be fun for them, because why are they going to do it if it isn't? And what implications does this have on, anxiety, if they're particularly scared of a coach? Or yeah, I think it's important.
In your opinion and in your academic life, are the best coaches coaches who've got greater EQ, not just great sports coaches, but the emotional intelligence around what they're doing?
Yeah, the best coaches by far have the most emotional intelligence. Again, just going back to Steve Kerr, who's the head coach of the Golden State Warriors. When he played for won NBA championships with the Chicago Bulls, played with Michael Jordan, and then he transitioned into being a coach, and he was mentored by some excellent coaches. And he said, what's important? What drills should I run? And they were like, these mentors to him were like, what drills you run don't matter. What matters is how you engage with the people, how you engage with your players, how you make them feel. And probably only the best coaches can do that, because they've no, sorry, the people with the best emotional intelligence can do that because they can relate to people. And I think if you look at, it's not just in sport but in life in general, the best teachers, the best coaches, the best leaders, they all have this high level of emotional intelligence, which allows them to relate to people. It allows them to fulfill the needs of people. As people and children, we all have basic psychological needs: the need to feel cared for, the need to feel competent, and the need to feel in control of what we do. And the best leaders do that. The best coaches do that all the time.
Is the mental benefits of sport on a par with the physical benefits of sport for young people then?
But I think if the caveat is if they're coached well, if 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 they're coached well, then yeah, absolutely. I think that running around is fun. It's building, making friends. All of these factors lead to fun and enjoyment. And again, what if you think about to a child, what are the benefits of playing sport? Well, you make new friends. You spend time with your friends on a weekend. Spend time with your friends away from school. You get to feel competent at what you're doing. You running around, which also has beneficial effects on the mood and the mind. So yeah, I'd say all of these factors contribute to it potentially having as many benefits as the physical benefits. And then you
And
go
if we're
into all
looking at
the
play their way,
sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, and then if you think about all the other things that it brings, about learning, about communication, learning about discipline, i.e. turning up on time, supporting your friends, knowing you've got a role in the team and fulfilling that role and understanding that role. I think these are all important life lessons that I think a lot of people underestimate. And when I think about my own son playing sport, and these are the things that I think I'm really pleased and proud about. That he has he's a defender and he takes his role seriously. He knows his role, he sticks to it. And what? I just think that's a massive life lesson for him about, will help him, moving forward about getting to training on time, being disciplined. And I just think for me, they're the biggest things I take out of him playing sport.
You've talked about NBA coaches, and I'm going to bring up an NCAA coach and Jim Harbaugh, who was the Michigan State football coach, and in the All or Nothing documentary that he appeared in, he talked about forming adults. He wasn't trying to make NFL players; they were collegiate athletes, but he was turning them into good adults. Now, I think there's a perhaps fear amongst coaches that they're shouldering the responsibility of life lessons, but actually it's not an additional, is it? It's just something that's part of sport coaching. So is it something they need to put greater focus on as an individual when they're coaching, or is it just something they need to be mindful of that they are part of that and it's intrinsic in sport coaching?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I would question how aware coaches are of this. When you think back at some grassroots coaches, it seems it's all about winning. That's what their main focus is. I'm preparing this team to win. But again, if you look at the greats of the NCAA in America, Nick Saban, who was at Alabama, Gene Auriemma, who was at Connecticut, and these are coaching Division One athletes who are elite elite athletes essentially. But if you look at their principles and their philosophies, it's about we're creating good people, we're developing good people, we're teaching people life skills so that if they don't go into professional sport, if they go in whatever job they go into, business, teaching, they've learned life skills. And when we talk about life skills, it's about rewarding teamwork, rewarding good communication, discipline of turning up on time, playing in your role. So I think these are essential skills that all coaches should be teaching, and maybe they're just not aware of that or how the ways in which they can do that. So rewarding effort, rewarding hard work, uh, rewarding selflessness in putting a team first. All those factors is what I would see are life lessons. And if you have people who coach in an elite environment where, for example, at Alabama football, they had, 80 to 90,000 people watching their team play. Yet Nick Saban's main focus was on coaching the individual to be a better person. And then if you actually look into it further, they all say things such as if you get all those things right, if you get the discipline right, if you get all those personal characteristics right, you recruit good people. Actually, the team performance improves anyway.
I didn't think we were ever going to get the Crimson Tide on this podcast, but I'm really happy that you brought it up today.
Yeah,
It,
Nick Saban is an absolute legend. I post so much about him on LinkedIn, and just his philosophy about developing people is just amazing.
is coaching philosophy something that we look at as being exclusively for elite coaches when actually if you are a grassroots coach you should have your own philosophy or you naturally have one, it's just recognizing what yours is?
Yeah, I think so. I think as it's about authenticity. It's about knowing who you are as a person, what your values stand for, and then introducing that into the way you coach. If you look at Phil Jackson, the Chicago Bulls coach, he's a big advocate of knowing who you are and then coaching that way. Not trying to coach like him, not trying to coach like Nick Saban or Gene Auriemma or whoever, Sir Alex Ferguson. It's about knowing who you are and bringing those values to your coaching. And I think that's really important because I think people see through if you're not being authentic. You're trying to be someone else. You can't do that.
I think kids see through it very quickly as well, don't they?
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, 100%, yeah. 100. Like you said, do you underestimate children? Yeah, children see through things. Yeah, very, very quickly, don't they? I think.
We've talked to a lot of coaches who coach coaches on this podcast, and obviously as part of UK coaching that's what we are about,
Yeah.
but they're talking about things on very practical terms. So what are the kind of key things that you would advise to coaches to think about in their toolkit, coming from a more psychological approach and putting that at the heart of it?
Yeah, there's a number of things, and I think for me the most important aspects of coaching from a psychological perspective are fulfilling these basic psychological needs of athletes. So how do we do that? Well, so people have a need to feel good at what they do. So how do you do that as a coach? Well, there are a number of different things. It's about when developing training sessions, it's about having challenges that or having drills that are difficult but attainable. So they have this optimal challenge. Uh, Praise and improvement and effort, and this effort and this praise should be specific. So well done on that pass, the direction and the weight were excellent. So again, being specific. Encourage athletes to have self-reference goals. So, for example, I don't know if you're doing some form of conditioning work. It might be a 40-meter time so it might be improving a 40-meter sprint time by a set amount of time, improving the number of shots on goal. Just but the goals are self-reference, and the reason why that's important is because it's encouraging the children to move away from comparing themselves to others, because we don't want that. Maybe keeping feedback in private. Again, I think one thing I don't like to see sometimes is when coaches criticise an individual in front of a whole team. Fair enough, a child may have been disruptive or not helping the session run smoothly, but actually it can have a negative impact. So keeping feedback. But then if we look at how do we fulfill this autonomy needs, so the needs for children to be in control. So I think it's massively important is giving them input and a choice in what you do. And it might be that uh, you say you have 5 drills set up for a particular training session. So you want the children to do all of those, but you give them the choice in the order in which they do them. So it's this they are getting a sense teaching them in their preferred way. So thinking about their age, what the things that they like, trying to do that. And then another key thing is, again, which links to autonomy. It's about giving the children their own pace in which they progress. So, for example, if you have one of these 5 drills, let the child spend as long as that on a particular drill as they want. Don't rush them into saying, right, 2 minutes up now, you have to go on to the next drill, because actually they may need more time. Uh, have varied activities, and for me, the biggest thing, which is about provoking curiosity. So asking questions to players. Why do you think we're doing this drill today? Why do you think this might be beneficial to how you play on a Sunday? Because you know, kids do want to win and they want to try hard. They want to be able to perform at their best. But as a coach, it's about provoking that curiosity and then not putting too much emphasis on the results. Like again, I know from first-hand experiences that even when leagues aren't published and results aren't published and scores aren't kept, 8-year-olds know the score. They'll know whether they won 5-3 or lost 4-2 or whatever. They know the scores. So, but as a coach, it's about being aware of that, but not putting an emphasis on that, because that's not important. And I think also just finally, it's about making children feel cared for. Uh, Give them uh, positive support, regardless of whether they've won or they've lost. Show interest in them as people. Promote cooperation. Again, these are life lessons. Encouraging them to work together and working as a team, and just be enthusiastic. Turn up to sessions, being enthusiastic. I sometimes think sometimes you can tell when the coaches have had a bad day or maybe had an argument with their wife prior to coming to the session, because they're starting in a grumpy mood, and just being aware of that and not doing that, and just have empathy that not all children or adolescents will pick up a new skill as quick as the others. So being empathetic to that they are trying, and that sometimes it might take them just a little bit different, and just really be aware of your language and your so you don't have any abusive language. Again, I've seen that. And do you know one thing that really upsets me is when you see parents now on the sidelines, having a go at the opponent's, 9-year-old son for doing a bad tackle. And so I think as a coach as well, it's being aware and encouraging the parents of your children to kind of, and that's difficult, I know, but I'm just covering it, and I think of all the factors that contribute to a child not having a fun experience, and for me,
Hmm.
it's the coaches and the parents, and it's about how you kind of navigate that. And I don't think it's easy, I really don't, but it's something that's so important that we do.
And I think just to pick up on that, it's really interesting. All those things that you talk about when we're talking about centralizing play and fun to some extent,
Yeah,
we're thinking about those moments that we're coaching children in those environments, but it's all of those external factors that can also
yeah,
inform their enjoyment of that
yeah.
session.
It is absolutely. And like one thing I think, so where we walk past the pitch, there's a big FA respect sign up. Remember the referees are volunteers, the coaches are, humans, the children are children, let them have fun. Honestly, it seems like that sign, as soon as someone's walked past that, it's like it's gone lost from their memory, And so the FA, I know the FA organisations, the FA and other organisations are trying, but those messages they don't seem to be sinking in because people forget
I
or
think it's
choose
a
to
really
ignore them.
powerful way for us to end this podcast. Professor Adam Nicholls, you've been a fantastic guest today, and this has been so informative. And if you're listening and you want to read more about Professor Nichols's thoughts and philosophies around coaching, you can follow him on LinkedIn. It's Professor Adam Nicholls with two L's in Nicholls.
Thank you very much, LJ. Thank you.
Thank you for listening today. We hope you've enjoyed. Be sure to leave us a review and share this with someone else who you think might enjoy it too. Check out our website, www.playtheirway.org, and follow Play Their Way on social media at Play Their Way on TikTok, X, and LinkedIn, and at Play Their Way UK on Facebook and Instagram.